Welcome to another S&P 500 analysis. Today is April 2nd, 2021. I begin to sound like a broken record. Week after week, I've been saying the S&P 500 made another new high and closed with a new closing high. And this week, it's no different. Yes, the S&P 500 made another new record high and closed with another new record closing high. Now, many of you, just like me, are wondering when this market will do a correction or when it will top. In this video, I will tell you some of the things that I will be watching for a sign of a market top or a beginning of a correction. In addition to our review of the S&P 500 and the other major market indexes, the market sentiment and the market internal, we'll also look at some of the stock analysis requests submitted by some of you, so stay tuned. Looking at this weekly chart of the S&P 500, we see it put in a new high and close with a new high. The range for the week was 77.38 points. It closed the week with a gain of 41.68 points or 1.14%. It also put in a higher low, thus reversed last week's one-time framing down to one-time framing up. The price is also well above the 10-week moving average and also the 40-week moving average and above this long-term megaphone channel. So the trend remained to be up on a weekly basis. Now let's take a look at the sentiment and the internal before we do a more detailed analysis of the S&P 500 and the other major market indexes. On this sentiment chart, we see the VIX came down to 17.33 level on Friday, and this is the lowest level we have seen since the pre-pandemic high back in February 2020. And the put-call ratio is at 0.56, so the market participants are still in a risk-on mode. We'll be keeping an eye on these two sentiment indicators for a sign of potential market turn. Moving on to the internal, the New York Stock Exchange up-down volume ratio has been fluctuating between +2 and -2, as the S&P 500 floating in the record high territory. We also observed that last Friday, the daily advance decline made an impressive surge, and the advancer led the decliner by 2,033. The NYSE new 52-week high outnumbered the new 52-week low throughout the week. It had been hovering slightly under the 200 mark and ended the week with 179 more 52-week high than 52-week low. The NYSE cumulative advance decline came up along with the S&P 500, but it is still slightly below its high, so there is a slight negative divergence. We'll watch this to see if this negative divergence persists. If it does, then that will be a clue for us to be prepared for a market turn or a market correction. Now looking at the Nasdaq up-down volume ratio, we see it's been sitting near this +2 for the last 3 sessions. The daily advance decline was strong on Friday as the advancing issue led the declining issue by 2,131. The Nasdaq new 52-week high outnumbered the new 52-week low once again. Although it is not by much, nevertheless it is positive. If the Nasdaq is to continue to recover, we need to see a more positive new high, new low. The Nasdaq cumulative AD line came off its recent low, but it's still holding a negative divergence between the Nasdaq 100. So overall, we are seeing market participants are getting a bit more risk on and showing a bit more complacency with the VIX dipping to a level that we haven't seen since February of last year. The internals are still positive, but the cumulative AD line from the NYSE and the Nasdaq still showing a negative divergence. And this needs to be resolved soon if the market is to continue to move higher. Now let's go into a more detailed analysis of the S&P 500 and the other major market indexes before we look at some of those stock requests. Starting off with this daily chart of the S&P 500. Remember last week we were basically looking for a 4,000 level on the upside and then ultimately come up to the 4,050, essentially up at this upper trend line of this price channel. So right now we see that it is seems like it's making its way up to that level. Now next week, if it decides to pull back, then we're essentially looking for this trend line for potential support. And if we break this trend line, then we be looking at these levels down here for possible retest for support here. So the first level of support that we'll be keeping an eye on for next week is 3870.90. If that failed, then we're essentially looking for a 3784. And ultimately, it might not be next week, but if it decide to do a little bit of an extended pullback, then we're basically looking for this S&P 500 to come down to retest this lower trend line of this price channel. And that would be somewhere around this 3720. And looking at the NASDAQ 100, remember NASDAQ 100 the last week were basically looking at this 13,280. We're saying if we could break above this 13,280 and get above this zone, then we're essentially looking for the NASDAQ 100 to come up and fill this gap. Then if we could get up to this pivot, which is 13,700, then the all-time high will be back in play. So right now, it came up above the 13,280 on Friday. So now for the coming week, we'll see would it be able to continue to move up and fill this gap and then take out the work its way up to take out the 13,700. But if it decides to reverse back, then the first level of support that we'll be keeping an eye on will be 12,786.92. And that support doesn't hold, then we're essentially looking for the 12,439. Then ultimately coming down back to this 12,204. So these are the three levels of potential support that we are continue to monitor. And right now it's taking out the 13,280. So we essentially are looking at this 13,600 and 13,700 area for potential resistance. For the Russell 2000, remember the prior week we were looking at this breakdown and we were saying that if it continue to come down, then we'd be looking for the possibility of a retest at 2,075 for potential support. But if we could reclaim this 2195, then we're essentially looking for the Russell 2000 to see would it be able to get back above this channel and work its way up to retest the all-time high at 2360.20. So right now it seems like it's trying to come up to this upper channel trend line. So next week we'll keep an eye on it to see would it be able to break above it and then work its way back up to an all-time high. But if it decide to pull back, then we're essentially looking once again for this 2195 area. If it could not hold this 2195, then we will essentially look for a retest of 2075. And eventually, we will be watching for it to come back down to this lower channel trend line near the 1935. But right now, this level is still quite a distance away. So for the near term, we're essentially watching this 2195 and 2075 for potential support. And for the Dow Jones Transportation, last week we're saying if it decides to pull back, then we're essentially looking for this gap fill here and possibly come down and retest this 14,242 for initial support. And if that support doesn't hold, then we're essentially looking for 13,656. As you can see right now, on Monday, it made a new high. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday, actually made a lower high, but also made a higher low. So it seems like it's forming a little bit of a flag here. So in the coming week, we're going to see would it be able to break above this all-time high here, intraday all-time high, and work its way toward the 15,000 level. And that's basically one of the near-term target that we're watching. But if it decides to pull back, then once again, we're essentially looking for this 14,242 as the first level of support. So that's what we'll be watching for the coming week is the 15,000 level and the 14,242 for the transportation. Now with this new closing high on Friday, that's also put the Dow theory in play. And looking at the Dow Jones Industrial, the Dow Jones Industrial made a new high the previous week on Friday. But last week, the Dow Jones Industrial did not make a new high, and neither did it close with a new closing high. On Friday, where the transportation closed with a new closing high, the Dow Jones Industrial did not. So that, based on the Dow theory, it is telling us that most likely the Dow Jones Industrial will come up and close with a new closing high in the near term. So we'll be watching to see will it come up and take out this intraday high and possibly get up to this upper trend line here of this channel. And the target that we are basically watching is this 33,500 level. But if it decide to pull back, then once again, it will be this trend line here on this intermediate channel to be the support level. If it doesn't hold that, then we're basically looking for it to come down and test this 32,000 area and see what that hold. If that doesn't hold, then it's basically down at this 31,668 or near this lower channel trend line. So those are the two support levels that we will be watching for the coming week. And this upward trend line here near the 33,500 is the level that we'll be watching for the Dow Jones Industrial on the upside. Now, before we move on, I just want to go to some of the ETF. Some of you might be trading the ETF. So we're going to take a look at the SPY, the ETF for the S&P 500, the QQQ, the ETF for the NASDAQ 100, and also the IWM, the ETF for the Russell 2000. Now, starting off with the SPY, as you can see, I have a composite volume profile here. And you can see that I am looking at this as a bull flag, and I also have a major move on this bull flag, and basically projecting up at this 100 level, it will be $410. But at the 80% level, it's 404.52 area. Remember the cash index on the S&P 500? We have a potential target somewhere around that 4,050. So that would put this level in coincide with that potential target on the SPX. So right now it came up to this 61.8. And in the coming week, if this expand upward, then we're essentially looking for this thing to move up to this trend line here, and that would get to that 404, 405 area. Now, if this decide to pull back, we see that there is a composite value area high. So we want to look to see would it be able to find support here and then push this back up. If it could not find support and it dip back inside of this value area, this high volume area here. Let me mark that off, this high volume area. This is what we call the value area. If it come down, then essentially the next target level that I'd be watching, if it pull back into this value area, then I'd be watching at this 290, 291 area. Okay, this point of control. All right, this is the price level where the highest volume have been traded at this particular price level based on this particular time period. All right, so we're basically looking for this to see would it get a bounce, and that pretty much coincide with this trend line as well. So if it doesn't hold this point of control, then I expect it to work its way down to the next high volume area, which will be somewhere around this 383, 384 area. Okay, so that is the SPY. Now let's go and take a look at the QQQ. And looking at the QQQ, now a lot of you last week was essentially looking at this break of this trend line and say that is a reversal of this QQQ downtrend. Well, but look at where it actually came up to. This is the value area high of this value area. And this could act as a resistance or a breakout. So if it could break out of this value area high, come back, successfully retest this thing. Remember this gap here? This is a little bit of a low volume node. So if it could move to this low volume area, then work itself up to this high volume node, which is this pivot high here. We talk about this pivot high on the NASDAQ 100 cash index, right? And essentially they have to get above this pivot high, then we be looking at the all-time high back in play. But if it's unable to get above this pivot high or even get into this low volume node, let's say you come up and get rejected and pushes back inside of this value area, below this value area high, then the target most likely will be this point of control at 314 area. That's where the highest traded volume price level. So if it could not hold this, then I'd be looking for it continue to retrace all the way back down to the other end of the value area, which will be somewhere down at this 387 to 301 area. Okay, so that is the QQQ. So I'd be watching to see what to break this value area high here at 324 on the Q. And for the IWM, the Russell 2000 ETF, you notice that it came down and got a nice bounce off the POC. So right now, it seems to be chopping to this high volume area. So if it could get above this 230.32 area, this little bit of a low volume zone here, then we could see this ETF make its way up and try to retest the all-time high. But if it come up and get rejected back down and pushes back down and retest this point of control, then I'll be watching for the possibility of moving back down to this 204, 205 area and retest this pivot low. So those are the ETF for the S&P 500, the NASDAQ 100, and the IWM. Now let's go and take a look at the dollar, gold, Bitcoin, silver, and the stock requests. Let's look at this chart of indexes before we go and take a look at those individual stock analysis, gold, silver, the dollar, and Bitcoin. This is a chart of the indexes, and we notice that the Dow Jones Transportation and the S&P 500, they both made new closing high on Friday. The New York Stock Exchange Composite and the Dow Jones Industrial is approximately 20 points away from its all-time closing high. Then you see that the NASDAQ 100 and the NASDAQ Composite is still a little bit distant away. And ignore this section of the chart here on the composite. I think there's a bad data point. And the Russell 2000 also a little bit distant away. So from last Friday with this transportation, the Dow Jones Transportation closing with a new closing high, the Dow theory is telling us to be on the lookout for a possible new high from the Dow Jones Industrial in the near term. In summary, we notice the market participants are getting a bit less fearful. And we'll be watching to see how the put-call ratio behave in the coming week to see all the market participant is also getting more greedy. Now, as the market participant getting more complacent and greedy, that could spell trouble for the market because the market has a tendency to do the expected when the market participant or least expected, and that is a potential correction. We also notice there is still a negative divergence between the AD line and the indexes, specifically with the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100. Now, unless these divergences get resolved on the positive side, the market could setting itself up for a reversal. And also the new high, new low, although it's still positive, but it's just barely hanging above that zero mark. So we need to see this expansion on the new high, new low. Otherwise, any future rally from the index are questionable. So those are some of the things that I will be watching for a sign of a market turn in the near term. Now let's go and take a look at those stock requests, gold, silver, the US dollar, and Bitcoin. In this segment of the video, I will do my technical analysis on the US dollar, Bitcoin, gold, silver, and these stock requests from some of my YouTube viewers. The stocks are Amazon, Netflix, Shopify, NVDA. These are the 4 stocks I put out a video to say that I am avoiding these stocks. And plug FUBO TV, Marathon Digital Holding, and Alibaba. Now, a disclaimer, these analyses are not investment advice. They are purely for educational purposes only. And here, looking at Bitcoin, I have a trend line here. We see that it broke below this trend line and then we claimed it up at this 55,000 area. Right now, it has worked itself up to the 60,000 level and seems to have encountered some resistance because it also encountered resistance back here. So right now it's pulling back. We want to see would it be able to hold this 58,367 area or essentially this trend line here. If it breaks this trend line, then I'm looking for a retest of this 55,000 area and possibly work itself down to the 53,000. But if get a bounce off of this 58,387 area and break above the 60,000, then I'd be looking for the possibility for it to come up and retest this all-time high at 61,788, and then possibly move up to the next round number, which will be 62,000, 63,000, and 64,000. So we'll see once it gets above this all-time high and see how it will react. But right now, essentially, the resistance that we're looking at is this 60,000 area. So if we could get to that resistance, then we could see it come up and make a play at the all-time high. But otherwise, the support level we'll be watching is 58,367 area, essentially this trend line, and then the 55,000 area if we break below the 58,000. And looking at gold here, we see that gold came down and got a nice bounce off of this trend line here after it broke to the 1700 level. Right now, it reclaimed and got back above this 1700 level. So we'll see, would it be able to work up toward the 1804 area and see would it be able to make it through. If it encounters resistance and pushes back, then we're basically looking for a retest of the 1700 level once again. But if it comes through and unable to hold this trend line, then I'm essentially looking for this 1546 area to get retested. And for silver, we saw silver book to this 2470, and right now it's trying to reclaim it. It got back slightly above it. So right now we basically want to see would it be able to come back up to this $26 area and possibly come up to this trend line near the 27 and back test that. So that's basically what I'm looking for on the upside is the 26 and possibly 27. If it failed to hold this level, to hold above this 2470 and reverse back down, then I'd be looking for silver to come back down and retest this 2272 area in the near term. Now let's start off with one of the 4 stocks that I did a video recently on saying 4 stocks to avoid. And those 4 stocks are Amazon, Netflix, Shopify, and NVDA. So we're going to take a look at these 4 first. And here on Amazon, right? Remember on Amazon, I was talking about this potential bear flag and waiting for this thing to break down. Then we see that at 61.8, it will come down at this level here, this potential pivot low or the support level, and also into this low volume zone. Then at the 80% level, which will be somewhere around 27.97, and essentially getting down to this low volume zone. Now, it got a nice bounce off its channel, the lower, the flag trend line here. And right now, it is still below this pivot high. So I'm still watching to see would it be able to take out that high and put in a higher high, and then possibly come back down and put in a higher low, then pushes up to this pivot. Then I would say that this flag has been invalidated, so that bear flag will no longer be a candidate to be a potential play. But the thing is, you have to see is that there is this high volume zone here, right? This high volume zone that is still have to be able to make it out and back test it and then move up for this 34.34. But if it failed to get out of this high volume zone and come back in to the other end of this zone and it breaks it, then I'd be looking for this thing to come to this low volume zone. And if it doesn't get rejected on this low volume zone, let's say come right to, then essentially there's a good possibility you're going to come down to this 2400 seeking support at this high volume node and get back into chopping around into this high volume zone. So that's why I still maintain the stand on avoiding Amazon until it could get up above this 34 and then start showing me some potential upside move that is more substantial than what it is right now. Because you look at it, right now, if you were able to catch it down here, hey, fantastic. Congrats. I don't know what kind of setup were you using that you are able to find those setup. More power to you. But right now, basically, I'm looking at this flag as a swing trade. And if it breaks this flag, on this bear flag, then we basically play it down to this 100% move and possibly trail it down to this 2400. But, if I look at it on a upside, I basically have to look at and wait until it get above this 3181, essentially above this this zone here, and then get a back test. Then I'll be going long here and play it possibly up to this 3434, and yeah, maybe to the all-time high. But there's no sign for me to say it's going to go to the moon yet. So right now, to me, the upside potential is much less than the downside potential if I get that downside break, right? Because it could, essentially break below the 3,000 all the way down to 2,400. So, that's a, that's a little bit of a better move for me than I'm waiting for here, possibly get up at the 3,200 and play it up to the 3,400, right? So I'm still holding this as a avoid, right? Not necessarily saying going short yet, because I'm still waiting for a setup to tell me to go short on this bear flag if it turns out to be a playable bear flag. And the other one is NFLX. NFLX is also on a bear flag type of potential play. We see that it dipped down below this bear flag lower trend line and then came back up, tried to do a little bit of a back test. Unfortunately, it did not get a follow through. If it did get a follow through on the downside, then that would be a trigger for me to look at possible short on Netflix and come down for this 80% level at this the 456 area. And this low volume zone, essentially this these supporting pivot low here. And if it unable to hold this and get rejected, then I essentially are looking for a move into this high volume zone here, somewhere around 416 level. And right now, even though it got a nice bounce off of here, I'm still looking to see would it be able to take out this high, essentially put in a higher high and come down and somehow put in a higher low to make it back up to this 572. Because here is this balance area that it has to work through. Right? It has to come up and then break this balance area and then move into a new high. But if it come up and fail to break out, then essentially I'm looking for this thing to retrace back down to this area here at 463 and possibly break that, then eventually get down to this point of control, this composite point of control at 363. So that's why I am still avoiding long on Netflix and still looking for the possibility of breaking this bear flag and making this move to break out of this balance area here and dip below 463. And here on Shopify, we're also looking for a bear flag. When we put this up, it was already broken down from this here. And right now you see that it came up and backtest this breakdown trend line here. But unfortunately, it did not have a follow through on the downside. Instead, it went back inside of this flag here. So right now, I'm still watching to see would it be able to take out this high. Essentially, just like Netflix and Amazon, it has to put in a higher high and then put in a higher low to reverse this downward trend here. Otherwise, this is all nothing than a shake and bake. And if it does continue to break down below this 1130, I'd be looking for a continuation play or a possible trigger of this bear flag here to come back down and play for this 80% major move. And that would bring it down to about 844 level, which is near these pivot low. So if it comes to this area and doesn't get rejected, then I'd be looking for this thing to retrace down to this 100%. And that would be somewhere around 751, 750 area in this high volume zone here. So once again, I'm still avoiding on the long side on Shopify unless it could prove otherwise and come up. There is this gap here. So there is this low volume zone come up to see would it be able to get to here. Then when it get up to this level, then I have to see what the price action is to look at potential long setup. Right? But right now it's all conjecture, to guess what it might or might not happen. So we'll see would it be able to come up and fill this gap, or would it get rejected and pushes back down? So shadow file, to me, on a swing basis, I'm still avoiding it. And the last stock that I said to avoid is NVDA. And NVIDIA, we're basically looking at this balance area, right? And we're basically looking for to break this balance area and then do a major move to come down to this pivot low here, which would be a 1x of this this move here, this range. As you can see, it came down and moved back in, so it seemed like it's a little bit of a look below and fail, right? You know, look below and then come back in. And right now, it's appeared to doing a maybe a look above and fail. So depend, would it come back in? If it come back in, then we'll probably be watching it to pull back into the 509 level. But if it could, you know, continue to move higher, let's say it came down and do a successful back test, then we essentially could see it come back up and get back maybe up to this level here at this balance area, right? This balance area. And you can see that it make a little bit sense here, because if we have this balance area and it came down and came back into this balance area, now it's forming a higher high and higher low, then the potential target level will be up at this upper value area near the 591. Then if we could break through this 591, then yeah, the all-time high could be back in play. So we'll keep an eye on that. But right now, essentially, this were, you know, still kind of questionable. I am not trading this guy here, so I am still avoiding on this upside purely because of these overvalued tech stock. The I believe the consolidation has not been totally completed yet. So we could still see a little bit more, you know, retracement or pullback on these tech stocks. Now, maybe it will move up here and then come back down. So we'll see. But definitely, it's not worth my while to go and chase this on the long side on NVIDIA right now. Neither is it worth my while to guess for a short to come down here. So I'm kind of waiting to see what it will do when it gets down here, because if we break this, I would rather wait right now to see would it break this zone and then come down and then play these high volume no, right, for potential target on the downside. So those are the 4 stocks that I have put out a video to say avoid, and I am still maintaining that stand on a swing basis to avoid. This request is also from one of the viewers of my channel. So let's take a look at plug power. Here we see there is a little bit of a downtrend, okay? And if we just want to connect this point here, we got a little downtrend, we got a little gap here, right? And also we got a little bit of a low volume zone. So it seems like recently it came down, got a rejection here off of this low volume no here, or at the edge of this high volume value area. So right now it's trying to come back up. We'll see, would it be able to come up and break through here and get a little bounce? Then that will probably reverse this downtrend. But if it unable to get to that this low volume area and come back down and break through this low volume zone, then I'll be watching these high volume no for potential support, and also this low volume zone here. So if it you know, bounce around and come down here and doesn't get a rejection back up, then watch these. And this is where the value is, right? That's where most of the volume have been traded at these price level. So if it breaks down and come to this high volume no, I'd be watching for the possibility to come back into the $5 level on plug. Okay, FUBO TV. All right, let's go and identify some of these potential volume area. Okay, so I got this value area here. I'm just blocking this off. Let me do this instead. Let's go and block this off here. And here's the value area low. So this is the composite point of control here at 2838. And this is the value area low, 2560. you see that it basically been bouncing off of this value area and try to get a bounce back up toward this the value area high here, but unable to do so the last time that it came down here. So right now it blocked this balance area, this value area, and trying to make a way back up. So the key things to watch now is would it be able to get back above this 2560 and get back into this value area. And if it could hold inside this value area, then I'll be looking at this point of control as the first initial target of 28.38 and possibly get up to this $30 level here at this high volume area, right? So basically chop up to this area. And if it could, hold support and chop its way up, maybe work its way back up toward the 45 level eventually. But right now, the key level to watch is to see would it be able to get back above the 2560. Then the if it does, then the initial target will be 28.38. But for some reason, if it is unable to get back above this this value area and get rejected at this value area low and move due back below this volume area, right? Chop through this and then come down to this low volume zone here, okay? And it doesn't get rejected back up and instead come to, then we basically be looking at the possibility for the price to move back into this this value area here. So here's the value area that we're looking at. And then if it come back in to this area, then we could possibly see this thing, work its way back down to this $10, $9 level. So if it unable to get back above this and instead come up, get rejected, come back down and chop around in the zone and then break through, break down and dip below this low volume zone and into this balance area, then we could see it work itself back down to the $10 level. All right, so that is FUBO TV. All right, Marathon Digital Holding. Yeah, I missed this one. I was watching it. I did not play this one. I played the Riot. So I no longer have a position on either one of these. So right now, I think it's a little bit too high, too frothy for me to go and try to chase it. But in any case, let's take a look at Marathon Digital Holding here. Yeah, it's kind of making a new high here. It just came off of a new high. So let's see. Here we see a little bit of a low volume zone here. So we're going to try to keep an eye on this area. And here's the another low volume zone. So we basically to see would it be able to get rejected and pushes up. But if it come back in and fall to this low volume area, then we could see it, come down and try to get into this high volume area between 40 and maybe $38 level here, right? On a pullback. And if it continue to move itself down, then we're basically looking at this 32.50, this low volume zone to see would it get rejected. Essentially, we're looking at this as a value area, right? To do a little bit of a balancing. And if it could continue to be above this value area, then we look for this thing to move up to seek the next area for it to create a balance or to find acceptance. And one way to measure or project some potential target when any type of stock or instrument is at a new high is that you could either use Fibonacci retracement, that's basically what I do, or extension, or 1x over range, or 2x over range, and that sort of thing. So if we use this range here, right, and project this up into 1x, and this level up here. Okay, so basically looking somewhere around this 1x, close to this $60 level. So if we do a 1x projection on this range, okay, so that would be the upside, and the downside essentially, come back down to this $40 and 39 area, 48.38 area, and see what it holds. If it doesn't hold, then we're essentially looking for this level down here somewhere around this $30 range. Okay, so that's for Marathon Digital Holding. And here's a last request, Alibaba. Alibaba, see that after it put in a high, it came down, and right now it's putting a lower high, and it could move down and put in a lower low. So if we take a look at this value area here, the composite value area, and here's the point of control. So right now it seems like it is moving back into this value area. It moved into it once and then bounced right back, and right now it seems like it coming back in. So unless it could move back and get away from this value area and move up to this 265 area, this high volume node, then I'd be watching for Alibaba to possibly come back down to this first target level, which is this composite point of control near the 177.70 or 178, kind of a round, nice round number here, and to see would it be able to hold support and chop around here. But then still there's a possibility of, after a little bit of a chopping there, it could come down to this 147, 148 area at this lower value area low. Okay, so so Alibaba doesn't look that positive to me, and but you could trade either side depending on the price action, right? If it come down and then come back out, successfully backtest that value area high, then we can look for the possibility of a short-term move back up to the 260, 265 area. And if it comes back into the value area and fail to hold the value area high and start moving down, then you could play it down to this composite point of control at 177.70 and 178. Okay, so that is basically it for this week. I think this video is getting way too long. I hope you have enough patience to watch it all the way through. And be sure to smash that thumbs up and help me promote and share this video. So have a great weekend, and thank you for watching. Stay safe.